My name is Cornelius Blackwood, and I've been the night watchman at Ravens Hall Academy for 15 years. In all that time, I've seen my share of strange things. Kids sneaking around after curfew, teachers having nervous breakdowns in empty classrooms, the occasional raccoon family making themselves at home in the cafeteria. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what started happening 3 months ago. It began on a Tuesday night in October. I was making my usual rounds, checking doors and windows, when I heard it. Piano music, soft and melancholy, drifting through the corridors like smoke. At first, I thought maybe one of the music students had snuck back into practice. Wouldn't be the first time. But when I checked the music wing, every door was locked tight, just like I'd left them hours earlier. The music stopped the moment I reached for my keys. I shrugged it off. Old buildings make weird noises, and after 15 years in this place, I'd learned not to jump at every creak and groan. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, 3:17 a.m. exactly. Same haunting melody that seemed to pull at something deep in my chest. This time, I was ready. I had my flashlight out and my keys in hand before the first note faded. But again, the moment I approached the music wing, silence fell like a heavy curtain. By the fourth night, I was getting annoyed. Someone was messing with me, and I didn't appreciate it. I decided to stake out the hallway, positioning myself around the corner from the music wing with a clear view of all the doors. At 3:16 a.m., I held my breath and waited. The music started right on schedule, but here's the thing that made my blood run cold. I could see every single door in that hallway, and they were all still locked. The music was coming from inside the sealed music room at the end of the hall. Room 237, the one that hadn't been opened since the fire. See, there's something about room 237 that most people at Ravens Hollow don't talk about. Back in 1987, a student named Octavia Grimm died in there. She was practicing late one night for some big competition when an electrical fire broke out. They found her the next morning, burnt beyond recognition, still sitting at the piano bench. The room was gutted, sealed up, and nobody's been inside since. Until now, apparently. I should have called the police. Should have called the headmaster. Should have done anything except what I actually did, which was walk up to that door and try the handle. But something about that music, it wasn't just sad, it was desperate. Like whoever was playing was trying to tell me something important. The door swung open with a rusty creak that echoed through the empty hallway. The smell hit me first. Not the musty odor of a room that's been closed for decades, but something sharper. Smoke and ash, as if the fire had happened yesterday instead of 37 years ago. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a room that should have been empty except for debris and water damage. Instead, I saw the piano. It was the same old upright that had been in there before the fire, but somehow it looked wrong. The wood was charred black in places, and several keys were missing, leaving gaps like broken teeth. But it was playing. The keys were moving up and down by themselves, producing that same melancholy tune I've been hearing night after night. On the music stand sat a piece of sheet music, brittle and yellow with age. The edges were burned and parts that were legible, but I could make out the title at the top, Requiem for the Lost by Octavia Grimm. As I watched, frozen in place, the invisible pianist reached the end of the readable portion of the music. The playing became hesitant, uncertain. The same few measures repeated over and over, as if the player was trying to remember what came next, but couldn't quite grasp it. That's when I saw her. At first, it was just a shimmer in the air above the piano bench, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. But gradually, she became more solid. A girl, maybe 17, with long dark hair that moved as if underwater. Her dress was old-fashioned and singed around the edges. Her fingers, translucent and pale, moved across the keys with desperate precision. She looked up at me then, and I saw her eyes. They were filled with such longing, such unfulfilled purpose, that I felt tears spring to my own. "I can't remember," she whispered, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "I can't remember how it ends." I understood then. Octavia Grimm had been working on her masterpiece when the fire took her. She'd been so close to finishing it, so close to completing something beautiful and important. And now she was trapped, playing the same incomplete melody night after night, unable to rest until her work was done. "What do you need?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. She gestured to the burn sheet music. "Help me finish it. Help me remember. I'm not a musician. Can barely carry a tune in a bucket." But I found myself walking toward that piano, toward that ghost girl with her desperate eyes and her unfinished song. Because sometimes you don't need to understand something to know it's right. And that's how I, Cornelius Blackwood, night watchman and tone-deaf old fool, found myself spending the next 3 months learning to play piano from a ghost. Every night at 3:17 a.m., Octavia would appear, and we'd work together, one note at a time, to complete her requiem. The night we finally played it through from beginning to end, she smiled. The first time I'd seen her look truly peaceful. The music filled the room like warm light, and I felt something inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Joy, maybe, or hope. When the last note faded, so did she, just dissolved into the air like morning mist. But before she vanished completely, she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Room 237 has been quiet ever since. The piano is just an old, burned piece of furniture now. But sometimes, on particularly still nights, I swear I can hear the faint echo of that completed requiem drifting to the halls of Ravens Hollow Academy. And you know what? It's beautiful. Story 2. I'm Bartholomew Creed, and I've been working nights at Thornwick High for 8 years now. 8 years of mopping floors, checking locks, and pretending I don't see the things that go bump in the night. But what I'm about to tell you, hell, I'm not even sure I believe it myself. It started with the missing kids. Now, you might think that's something everyone would notice, but here's the thing about teenagers. They disappear all the time. They skip school, run away from home, move to different districts without telling anyone. The teachers barely keep track of who's supposed to be in their classes on any given day. But when you work nights like I do, you notice patterns. You notice when the same kids who used to sneak back into school after hours to retrieve forgotten textbooks or meet up with friends suddenly stop showing up altogether. First, it was Jasper Wickham, a quiet kid who played chess in the library during lunch. Then Cordelia Ashford, who always forgot her math homework and would slip back into the side door I deliberately left unlocked. After that, it was Thaddeus Blackwell, who had a habit of hiding in the janitor's closet when his stepdad got too drunk. 3 kids in 2 months. All of them just gone. No missing person reports that I heard about. No Amber Alerts. Nothing. It was like they'd never existed at all. The only connection I could find was locker 237. I'd noticed it during my rounds because it was different from the others. Most of the lockers in the C wing were beaten up, covered in scratches and dents from years of teenage abuse. But 237 looked pristine, almost new. The metal was smooth and unmarked, and it had this weird way of catching the light from my flashlight, like it was made of something that wasn't quite steel. The locker belonged to a girl named Serafina Voss. I'd seen her around, one of those kids who seemed to glide through the hallways like she owned the place. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect grades according to the honor roll posted in the main office. But there was something about her that made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way she smiled without her eyes, or how other students seemed to avoid her even though she was clearly popular. It was during my 3rd week of watching that I first heard the scratching. I was checking the C-wing locks around 2 a.m. when this sound started coming from locker 237. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Like fingernails on metal, but from the inside. I pressed my ear against the cold surface and heard something that made my blood freeze. A voice, muffled and desperate, calling for help. "Hello?" I whispered, feeling like an idiot. "Is someone in there?" The scratching stopped immediately. Then I heard what sounded like a wet chuckle, low and satisfied. I should have pried that locker open right then and there. Should have called the fire department with the jaws of life. But the combination lock was one of those old-fashioned ones, and I didn't have the authority to break school property without a damn good reason. I heard scratching wasn't going to cut it with the principal, so I started watching Serafina instead. She came to her locker every day at exactly 3:15 p.m. after most of the other students had cleared out. She'd spin the combination, Always the same sequence, and I memorized it from watching to the security cameras. And open the door just a crack. Never wide enough for me to see inside, but wide enough for her to slide something through the gap. At first, I thought it was just papers or books. But then I started noticing the smell that would drift through the hallway afterward. Rotten meat mixed with something sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The smell would linger for hours, and by morning, it would be gone. That's when I decided to check her locker myself. I waited until she'd left for the day, then made my way to the C wing with my master keyring. But when I got to locker 237, I realized something that made my hand shake. There was no keyhole. The locker could only be opened from the inside or with the combination. I'd memorized the sequence. July 13th, 23. My fingers trembled as I spun the dial. Left to 13, right to 7, left to 23. The lock clicked open with a sound like breaking bones. The smell hit me first, so strong I gagged and stumbled backward. But I forced myself to look inside, and what I saw will haunt me until the day I die. The locker was bigger on the inside. Impossible, I know, but I'm telling you what I saw. Instead of the cramped metal box it should have been, there was a tunnel stretching down into darkness. The walls were slick and pulsing like the inside of a throat, and scattered along the tunnel floor were pieces of clothing, backpacks, and other things I didn't want to identify. But the worst part was a sound coming from deep within that impossible space. A wet, rhythmic chewing, punctuated by the occasional satisfied grunt. I slammed the locker shut and ran. The next day, I confronted Serafina after school. She was walking to her car, a shiny BMW that no high school student should have been able to afford. When I stepped out from behind a pillar, "I know what you're doing," I said. She turned to face me, and for just a moment, her perfect mask slipped. Her eyes went completely black, and when she smiled, I saw rows of teeth that were too sharp and too numerous to be human. "Do you?" she asked, her voice layered with harmonics that made my teeth ache. "And what exactly am I doing, Mr. Creed?" "You're feeding them to something. The missing kids. You're feeding them to whatever's living in that locker." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Bartholomew, you think I'm the monster here? That thing down there was here long, before I was born. It's been feeding on students for decades, taking one here and there, never enough to cause suspicion. But it was getting weak, getting hungry. So we made a deal." "What kind of deal?" "I feed it regularly, and in return, it gives me what I need. Perfect grades, perfect life, perfect everything. And when I graduate, I'll leave this place behind and let it find its own meals again." "You're insane." "Am I? Look around you, Mr. Creed. Look at this place. These kids are already lost. I'm just making sure their sacrifice means something." I knew I had to stop her. But how do you fight something that's made a deal with a monster? How do you explain to the authorities that there's a creature living in a locker that's bigger on the inside? That night, I made my own decision. I went back to locker 237 with a can of gasoline and a lighter. If I couldn't save the kids who were already gone, maybe I could prevent more from disappearing. But when I got there, the locker was empty, just a normal metal box with a few textbooks and a mirror taped to the inside of the door. And in that mirror, I saw Serafina standing behind me. "You're too late," she whispered. "It's already full. It doesn't need to feed anymore." I turned around, but she was gone, and so was my shadow. I quit that night and never went back to Thornwick High. But sometimes on quiet evenings, I drive by the school and count the cars in the parking lot. There are always fewer than there should be. And I wonder how many more deals Serafina made before she graduated. How many more kids she fed to the thing that lives in locker 237. Story 3. Name's Mortimer Ashworth, and I've been watching over Grimwood Elementary for 12 years now. 12 years of making sure the boiler doesn't explode, the windows stay locked, and the raccoons don't turn the cafeteria into their personal playground. I've seen teachers come and go, watched kids grow up and move on to middle school, even outlasted 3 different principals. But there's one teacher who's been here longer than all of them, and that's what scares the hell out of me. Her name is Cordelia Thorne, and she arrived on the worst snowstorm I've ever seen. It was January of 1995. I was still new then, only been on the job for about 6 months. The storm hit us like a freight train, 2 feet of snow in 12 hours, winds howling like banshees, power lines down all over the county. School should have been canceled, but this was back when the superintendent was one of those we walked uphill both ways types who refused to close for anything short of a nuclear winter. Most of the regular teachers couldn't make it in. Hell, most of the kids couldn't either. We had maybe 30 students scattered across 6 grades, and only 2 teachers who lived close enough to trudge through the drifts. Principal Morrison was pulling his hair out, trying to figure out how to supervise that many kids with so few adults. That's when she knocked on the front door. I remember it clearly because I was the one who answered. There she stood in the middle of a blizzard, not a single snowflake on her long black coat, not even breathing hard for what should have been an impossible walk through waist-deep snow. She was maybe 30, with pale skin and dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, pretty in an old-fashioned way, like she stepped out of a photograph from the 1940s. "I'm here about the substitute position," she said, her voice carrying despite the wind howling behind her. "What substitute position?" I asked, confused. She smiled, and something about it made me take a step back. "The one you need filled." Before I could ask any more questions, Principal Morrison appeared behind me, took one look at her, and his face lit up like Christmas morning. "Ms. Thorne, thank God you made it. Come in, come in. Room 15 is ready for you." I watched him lead her away, wondering how he knew her name when she hadn't introduced herself to either of us. But with the chaos of the storm and trying to keep the school running, I pushed it to the back of my mind. The storm lasted 3 days. When it finally cleared, Miss Thorne was still here, teaching a classroom full of second graders who hung on her every word like she was telling them the secrets of the universe. And she just stayed. At first, I figured she was covering for someone who was out sick or on leave. Substitute teachers sometimes stick around for weeks or even months if the regular teacher has a long-term issue. But weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and Cordelia Thorne never left. What really bothered me was that nobody else seemed to think this was strange. I tried asking Principal Morrison about it once, about 6 months after the storm. "How long is Miss Thorne going to be subbing in room 15? I asked. He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "What do you mean?" "She's not a substitute. She's been teaching here for as long as I can remember. But she started during the blizzard in 95. I was there when she showed up." "Mortimer, I think you're confused. Miss Thorne has been here much longer than that." I walked away from that conversation, feeling like I was losing my mind. But I started paying closer attention to Cordelia Thorne, and what I saw made my skin crawl. First, there was a way she never seemed to age. I've been here 12 years, and she looks exactly the same as the day she walked through that door. Same smooth skin, same dark hair without a trace of gray, same unsettling smile. Meanwhile, I've gone from brown hair to mostly gray, and I've got crow's feet that weren't there when I started. Then there were the kids in her class. They'd start the year normal, rowdy, energetic, the way 7-year-olds are supposed to be. But as the months went on, they'd get quieter, more obedient. They'd sit perfectly still in their desks, hands folded, staring straight ahead with these blank, empty expressions. Their parents would come to conferences raving about how well-behaved their children had become, how much their grades had improved. But I watched those kids walking through the halls like little robots, and it made my stomach turn. The worst part was their artwork. Every elementary school has student art hanging in the hallways, cheerful crayon drawings of houses and families and rainbows. But the pictures coming out of room 15 were different. Dark, disturbing images drawn in black and gray. Twisted trees reaching like skeletal hands. Houses with no doors or windows. And always, a tall figure in a long coat standing in the background, watching. I started making excuses to walk past room 15 during the day, trying to catch a glimpse of what was going on inside. What I saw didn't make sense. The classroom was always ice cold, cold enough that I could see my breath when I pressed my face to the window. But none of the kids seemed to notice. They'd sit there in their thin school clothes, perfectly still, while Miss Thorne moved between their desks like she was floating. And sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her reflection in the classroom windows showed something else entirely. Something old and withered, with eyes like black holes and fingers too long to be human. I tried talking to the other teachers, but they all gave me the same response Morrison had. Miss Thorne had always been there. She was a model teacher. The children loved her. I was clearly mistaken about when she'd arrived, but I wasn't mistaken. I knew what I'd seen that night in the storm. Last month, I finally worked up the courage to check the school records. I waited until everyone had gone home, then broke into the filing cabinets in the main office. What I found made my blood freeze. There was no record of Cordelia Thorne ever being hired. No employment application, no background check, no emergency contact information. But there were class photos going back 30 years, and in every single one of them, there she was. Same face, same age, same cold smile, standing behind different groups of children who all had that same empty look in their eyes. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know the truth. Tomorrow is the last day of school, and I've made a decision. I'm going to confront her, demand answers, try to break whatever hold she has over this place. If something happens to me, if I disappear, or if everyone suddenly forgets I ever existed, maybe whoever finds this will understand what they're dealing with. Her name is Cordelia Thorne, and she came here in a supernatural storm 30 years ago. She feeds on children's souls, stealing their energy and youth to maintain her own unnatural existence. And she'll keep doing it year after year, class after class, until someone stops her. I just hope I'm brave enough to be that someone. If not, well, at least now you know. Room 15, Grimwood Elementary. The substitute teacher who never left. The woman who steals children's souls, one second grader at a time. Story 4. Phineas Darkmore here. I've been the night custodian at Shadowmere Middle School for 6 years, and let me tell you something. Middle schoolers are weird enough during the day. At night, when the building's empty except for me and my mop bucket, that's when you really start to notice the strange stuff they leave behind. Usually it's harmless. Love notes shoved into lockers, crude drawings on bathroom stalls, the occasional stash of candy hidden behind loose ceiling tiles. But 3 months ago, I started finding things that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It started with a lipstick. I was cleaning the second-floor girls' bathroom when I noticed symbols drawn on the mirrors. Not the usual Ashley loves Jake, hearts, or teenage profanity, but actual symbols. Geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. Twisted characters that seemed to move when I wasn't focusing on them. They were drawn in what looked like deep red lipstick, but the color was wrong. Too dark, too thick. Like it had been mixed with something else. I scrubbed them off, figuring it was just some kids trying to be edgy. But the next night, they were back. Same symbols, same mirrors, like I'd never touched them at all. That's when I decided to pay attention. I started keeping track of which bathrooms had the symbols, when they appeared, how long they lasted. The pattern was always the same. They'd show up overnight. I'd clean them off, and they'd be back the next evening. But it wasn't random. The symbols were spreading, moving from the second-floor girls' bathroom to the third floor, then to the abandoned bathroom at the end of the east wing. That bathroom had been out of order for 2 years, ever since the pipe burst and flooded the whole area. The school board kept saying they'd fix it, but middle school budgets being what they are, it just stayed locked up and forgotten. Except now, somehow, the symbols were appearing on those mirrors too. I started staying late, hiding in supply closets and empty classrooms, trying to catch whoever was doing this. What I saw on the 4th night of my surveillance made me question everything I thought I knew about the kids at Shadowmere. It was just after midnight when I heard them, saw footsteps in the hallway, whispered voices speaking words I couldn't understand. I crept to the doorway of the supply closet, where I'd been hiding, and peered out. 7 girls, all 8th graders, were walking single file down the hallway toward the abandoned bathroom. I recognized most of them. Persephone Blackthorne led the group, followed by Ophelia Vex, Minerva Ashcroft, and a few others whose names I didn't know. They were all wearing dark clothes and carrying what looked like candles. Persephone had the key to the bathroom. Don't ask me how she got it, but she unlocked that door like she owned the place. The girls filed inside, and I heard the lock click behind them. I should have called the police right then. Should have called their parents, the principal, anybody. But curiosity got the better of me. I snuck down the hallway and pressed my ear to the bathroom door. What I heard made my blood run cold. They were chanting in a language that sounded older than anything I'd ever heard. The words seemed to twist in the air, making my teeth ache and my vision blur. And underneath the chanting, I could hear something else, a low, rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking on glass on the other side. The tapping was coming from inside the mirrors. I managed to find a loose ceiling tile above the bathroom and crawled up into the cramped space between floors. There was a small gap where I could see down into the abandoned bathroom, and what I witnessed there still gives me nightmares. The girls had arranged themselves in a circle around the large mirror above the sinks. Candles were placed at precise points around the room, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. But the shadows were wrong. They moved independently of the candles, writhing and reaching toward the mirror like living things. Persephone stood directly in front of the mirror, her hands pressed against the glass. The symbols I'd been cleaning off the other mirrors were carved into the frame of this one, and they were glowing with sickly green light. As she chanted, the mirror began to ripple like water, and something started to push through from the other side. At first, it was just a hand, pale and elongated, with fingers too long and joints that bent the wrong way. Then an arm, then a shoulder. Whatever was coming through that mirror was definitely not human. Its skin looked like it had been stretched over a frame that was the wrong size, and its eyes were black holes that seemed to drink in the candlelight. The girls were ecstatic. They dropped to their knees, bowing and chanting even louder. And the thing in the mirror, it smiled. Rows of teeth that looked like broken glass, arranged in a mouth that opened too wide. It spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "Soon, my children. Soon the barrier will be thin enough. Feed me your fear, your pain, your desperation, and I will give you the power you seek." Persephone nodded eagerly. "We understand, Master. We've been preparing, just as you taught us. The ritual on the night of the new moon will be ready. And the sacrifice, we have someone in mind, a girl who's been asking too many questions. Luna Brightwell from 7th grade. She's been trying to figure out what we're doing." The thing's smile widened impossibly. "Perfect. Young blood, innocent blood. It will complete the binding and allow me to cross over permanently." I'd heard enough. I crawled back through the ceiling as quietly as I could and got the hell out of that school. But I couldn't stop thinking about what Persephone had said. Luna Brightwell. I knew that kid, shy, smart, always reading the library during lunch. She didn't deserve whatever these girls had planned for her. The next day, I tried talking to the principal, but how do you explain something like that without sounding completely insane? "Hey, some of your students are trying to summon a demon through a bathroom mirror, and they're planning to sacrifice a classmate." Yeah, that would go over real well. Instead, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I waited until the school was empty, then went to the abandoned bathroom with a sledgehammer. If I couldn't stop the girls, maybe I could at least destroy their portal. But when I got there, the bathroom door was already open. The mirror was shattered, fragments of glass scattered across the floor, and written on the wall, in what looked like blood, were the words, "Too late." I checked the attendance records the next day. Luna Brightwell hadn't shown up for school. According to the office, her parents had called in saying she was sick, but something about the secretary's voice made me think she was lying. That was a week ago. Luna still hasn't come back to school, and the girls in Persephone's group have been acting different. More confident, more cruel. They walk through the hallways like they own the place, and other students scatter when they approach. And sometimes, late at night when I'm making my rounds, I catch glimpses of movement in the mirrors throughout the school. Dark shapes that shouldn't be there, watching me with eyes that reflect no light. I think they succeeded. I think they brought something through that mirror, and now it's loose in the school. Maybe it's still using the girls as its servants, or maybe it's moved on to hunting on its own. Either way, I'm done. I put in my notice today. Let someone else figure out what's lurking in the mirrors of Shadowmere Middle School. Let someone else deal with the cult of teenage girls who open a door to hell. I just hope they can close it again before it's too late. for everyone else. Story 5. My name is Zachariah Grimwald, and I've been head of security at Bleakmont High for 20 years. 20 years of breaking up fights, confiscating contraband, and making sure nobody burns a place down during homecoming week. I've seen it all, or at least I thought I had until I witnessed something that's been happening every June 13th for the past 3 decades. It's a graduation ceremony that should have ended years ago. The first time I saw it, I thought I was having a breakdown. It was my 3rd year on the job, June 13th, 2008. I was doing my midnight rounds when I heard music coming from the auditorium. Not unusual. Sometimes the drama kids would sneak in to rehearse, or couples would use the space for a romantic rendezvous. But this wasn't pop music or teenage whispers. This was pomp and circumstance, played on what sounded like a full orchestra. I figured someone had left a radio on after graduation practice, so I went to turn it off. But when I opened the auditorium doors, what I saw made me question my own sanity. The auditorium was packed. Every seat filled with people in formal clothes, all of them perfectly still, perfectly silent except for music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. On stage, a line of students in caps and gowns waited to receive their diplomas from a principal I didn't recognize, a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes and a smile that never reached them. But here's the thing that made my hands shake. I could see through every single person in that auditorium. They were there, but they weren't solid, like looking at people through fog or water. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The auditorium was empty, dark, silent, just rows of seats and a bare stage, exactly as it should have been. I wrote it off as stress, maybe too much coffee and not enough sleep. But the next year, on June 13th, it happened again. Same music, same ghostly crowd, same impossible graduation ceremony. And this time, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. The valedictorian giving his speech was a kid named Lysander Nightshade, and I recognized him from the memorial plaque in the school's main hallway. He died in 1995 along with 17 other seniors when their charter bus crashed on the way to graduation. The whole senior class wiped out 3 miles from the school on what should have been the happiest day of their lives. That's when I started doing research. I spent weeks in the school library, digging through old yearbooks and newspaper archives. The story was worse than I'd imagined. The class of '95 had been heading to their graduation ceremony at the Civic Center when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into their bus. 18 kids dead instantly, the driver too. The graduation ceremony was canceled. The families devastated. Those students never got to walk across the stage, never heard their names called, never received their diplomas. And apparently, they'd been trying to fix that oversight ever since. Armed with this knowledge, I prepared for the next June 13th. I brought a camera, a voice recorder, everything I could think of to document what I was seeing. But when midnight came and the music started, none of my equipment worked. The camera showed only darkness. The recorder picked up nothing but static. Whatever was happening in that auditorium existed on a frequency that technology couldn't capture. But I could see it clear as day. The ceremony played out exactly the same way each year. The ghostly audience, the phantom orchestra, the dead principal calling out names of students who'd been on the ground for decades. But I started noticing new details. The way Lysander Nightshade's eyes would scan the audience, searching for something. The desperate hunger in his expression when his name was called as valedictorian. The way he clutched his diploma like it was a lifeline. By my 10th year of witnessing the supernatural graduation, I understood what was happening. Lysander wasn't just reliving his graduation. He was trying to make it perfect. He was the one keeping the other spirits trapped there, forcing them to participate in his eternal ceremony, because he couldn't let go of the achievement he'd been denied. I started paying attention to missing person reports around graduation time. Students who stayed late at school and never made it home. Teachers who worked overnight and vanished without a trace. And I realized with growing horror that Lysander was recruiting a living audience for his ghostly graduation. Last year, I decided to do something about it. On June 13th. Instead of hiding in the hallway and watching through the crack in the door, I walked into that auditorium and took a seat in the back row. The ghostly graduates on stage could see me. Their translucent eyes followed my movement, and I heard whispers ripple through the phantom crowd. Lysander paused in the middle of his valedictorian speech and stared directly at me. "You," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the space between life and death. "You've been watching us." "For 13 years," I replied, surprised that my voice worked in this otherworldly space. "Then you understand. We never got our moment. We never got to graduate, to walk across that stage, to hear the applause. We were denied our triumph." I looked around at the other ghostly graduates, saw the sadness and exhaustion in their transparent faces. They didn't want to be there. They were tired, ready to move on, but they couldn't, not while Lysander held them. "You did graduate," I told him. "All of you. The school board awarded your diplomas posthumously. There's a ceremony every year on the anniversary of the crash. Your families were there. You were honored." Lysander's face twisted with rage. "That wasn't graduation. That was a funeral. We earned the right to walk across that stage, to be celebrated, to be valedictorian." His voice rose to a shriek that made the ghostly audience flinch. "You were valedictorian," I said quietly. "You had the highest GPA in your class. Everyone knew it. The achievement was yours whether you got to give the speech or not." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even hope, but then the anger returned. "No, it has to be perfect. It has to be the way it was supposed to be." I stood up and walked toward the stage. "Let them go, Lysander. They're tired. They want to rest." "I can't," he whispered, and for the first time, he sounded like the 18-year-old kid he'd been when he died. "If I let them go, I'll be alone. If I let them go, it means it's really over. It's been over for 30 years, I said gently, but that doesn't mean it didn't matter. Your life mattered. Your achievements mattered. You don't need an eternal graduation ceremony to prove that." The other ghosts on stage were nodding, hope beginning to shine through their translucent features. One by one, they began to remove their caps and gowns, letting them fall to the stage floor. The phantom audience started to fade, finally free to move on. Lysander was the last to go. He looked at me with eyes full of decades of pain and longing. "Will anyone remember us?" "I will. I promised. And I'll make sure others do too." He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd ever seen from him. "Thank you." And then he was gone. The auditorium has been quiet on June 13th ever since. But I keep my promise. Every year on the anniversary of the crash, I hold a small memorial service in that same auditorium. Just me, some flowers, and 18 names read aloud in the darkness. The class of 95 finally got their goodbye. Sometimes that's all a spirit needs to find peace.